Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last Women in Leadership webinar for 2020. For those of you who are new to the series, I am Sam Taylor, the Emergency Management Specialist for Resilient Services. Today I'll be co-hosting with Bree, our Operations Manager. We will still be recording and disseminating to our participants that can't join us today. So during discussions, if you'd prefer, you don't have to turn your camera on or identify yourselves. But if you're happy to, please do so. Before we get started, I would like to let you know that we will not be holding this series in January, as we will be shutting down for a couple of weeks for some well-earned R&R. But we'll be back in February, ready to take on what hopefully is a better year. So let's get started. Well, what a year it has been. I thought it would be great to reflect in this session on the year we have had, what could be coming our way, and our tribulations, triumphs, and aspirations moving forward from a year that has been potentially the most challenging year we've all seen or may ever see.
Looking back on 2020, we've seen so much happen. We've seen record-breaking droughts, fires, floods, a global pandemic, and even an outbreak of bird flu. All in Australia, and all of this in the space of 1 year. So why don't we break it down and have a closer look at each event? We'll start with the droughts, as technically they span more than just 2020. We're used to seeing droughts in our country. This is not the first year we've had horrendous droughts, and it won't be the last. But this one actually lasted for more than 34 consecutive months in New South Wales alone. It finally ended in January. Prior to that, farmers were selling off livestock for whatever they could get. Feed and water supply was so scarce that livestock were dying, so some money for an animal was better than no money and having to bury another carcass. There was nowhere near enough cash flow to support the farmers. There were some government grants and some relief, but not enough for them to keep running their farms. Many farmers had to sell and move on. This was heartbreaking to see, as so many of the farms being sold had been held by families for generations. But what else could they do but move on and try to start their lives over? This also impacted Australia's food supply and our export of meat overseas. Leading on from the drought were the bushfires of last summer. Let's not forget that the New South Wales drought played a major part in the worst bushfires on record. We all remember that the last bushfire season was horrific. The fires were so intense that they were burning through dirt, taking everything in their path, including the lives of residents, wild animals, livestock, and of course firefighters. These fires created funnel systems, making them more dangerous than we've ever seen, and to make matters worse, though it may not seem possible for things to get worse, New South Wales struggled with their water supply. After months of these fires burning, they were finally controlled and eventually extinguished, but the impact of the damage caused was yet to be realised to its full extent.
While we're talking about the bushfires, I'd like to share a little bit of a personal story relating to these. Over the Christmas New Year period during that season, I went to Sydney to see my family. We were very well aware of the situation that was happening, and my family is situated at the bottom of the Blue Mountains. Before we left, we checked everything, we had supplies if needed, and decided to go anyway. My husband is a CFA volunteer and is very well aware of what we could face on our little road trip. As we were driving up the Hume, we knew we had hit the first major fire zone. It was like we were just about to hit a wall of smoke. Instantly, we shut all the vents in the car and prepared for a not so pleasant stint up the Hume. We went from clear skies to barely being able to see. The aura was just red and dark. I've never seen anything like it. My husband kept driving. He knew what he was doing. And I had the awful job of trying to keep my kids calm as they were scared. And I don't blame them. I was terrified myself. It was like a scene from a movie, so surreal. I remember just getting this feeling come over me that I can't describe. But by the time we got through, we hit the roadblock as it was being reopened, and a sense of relief came over me. Now, I always knew what my husband did as a volunteer firefighter, but the experience really made me think about what he sacrifices when he gets on that truck, and gave me a sense of appreciation of what he does when he goes off to a fire. Anyway, we've had drought and fires, so why don't we throw in some floods as well while we're at it? May as well take a trip through all weather events. As the bushfires eased, Mother Nature decided it was time to let it rain. Well, she let it rain so much so that it caused flooding through the bushfire affected areas, causing more damage on top of what the fires had already done. But this wasn't the only significant flooding Australia was to endure. WA had flash flooding caused by Tropical Cyclone Damien as well. I think this covers most of the natural disasters for this year. Well, we hope anyway.
Anyone would think at this stage we'd endured enough this year. Well, I thought so too, until another dreaded announcement came. A global pandemic had broken out. You all know what I'm talking about. Coronavirus, COVID-19, Auntie Rona, whatever you want to call it. This changed the course of the world, possibly forever. Lockdowns happened, infection rates and death rates skyrocketed, and the entire world was halted. International and interstate travel ceased. Import and export of goods and services severely was impacted. Businesses closed and work from home was the only way to work for office workers. The economy went into freefall and the government started to provide financial support that we never could have predicted we were going to need in a country like ours. Hospitals had started cancelling all non-urgent surgeries, creating turmoil for patients who required non-Category 1 surgeries or cancer treatment, or ongoing monitoring for chronic health conditions. Patients died alone, separated from their loved ones by this horrendous virus we barely understood. Unlike the natural disasters we have seen, COVID isn't giving up. We can't just extinguish it like a bushfire. All we can do is hope that we can make it recede like a flood and try and prevent any further damage it can cause by developing a vaccine and find our way to what we are calling COVID normal. As we see it now, we still have some travel restrictions and the impact on mental health is severe. Mental health statistics have skyrocketed around the globe. In Australia, a survey was undertaken between the 3rd of April and the 2nd of May. It revealed that mental health issues were at least twice as prevalent than they would be outside of a pandemic situation. The lockdowns took a toll on everyone, not just in the sense that we couldn't go out and grab a coffee, but it separated families, friends, shut down industry, and meant months of isolation for so many people. Thankfully, it looks like we're currently winning the battle, but the war is not over. But more on that later.
At this point, I started to wonder what could be next. Could anything else happen? Had we seen and endured more than enough? Clearly, the answer was no. The next warning issued was for bird flu in Victoria. The worst outbreak recorded with over 460,000 birds destroyed in Victoria, causing other states to stand up incident management teams to monitor the situation and to hopefully prevent further outbreaks. This resulted in more financial hardship for farmers and people who had been through so much. Once again, I will say it. Wow, what a year. Now that we've looked back on the year, let's look into what is currently happening. While we have seen, lived through and reflected on the 2020 droughts, bushfires and floods, the one thing that has not left us yet is COVID. While it is currently receding in our country, take a look internationally. It is ramping up again around the world. England went back into lockdown. The USA is seeing an average of 1,000 deaths per day. Take that in for a moment. 1,000 deaths in one country every day due to a virus. And for 2 days last week, they clocked in at over 2,000 per day. This is not to mention their infection rates are in the 100,000s per day, predicted to reach 400,000 per day in the coming days, which means the death rate will likely continue to climb. But it doesn't just reflect us medically. This virus has caused the economy to slow down, creating a global recession. But are COVID and the recession the only events we are experiencing now? As much as I'd like to say yes, I can't. We need to take a look at the weather again. Have you noticed we are experiencing severe storms more frequently? Well, I have. Just last week, we experienced a range of supercells through Victoria causing widespread damage. We have also experienced heavy rains, increased winds throughout the state. Why do you think this is? Well, it turns out the answer is La Nina. I know what we're all thinking. Great, just what we need. Well, as you can see, it has been a pretty grim year, and it continues to be challenging. But has it all been bad? I think not. There have been positives out of all of this, and I think we need to reflect on them. As we all know, natural disasters seem to bring the community together. Support is provided to the affected communities in many ways to try and ease the pain that they are and have been experienced. If you look at the bushfires, funds have been raised and grants have been given to be able to rebuild and support the residents and businesses. But it was not just the financial side that was positive. When we looked around at the reports during and after the bushfires, we could see the Australian Defence Force helping, whether it be air support on the ground amongst the communities or nursing koalas back to health. It all created a sense of positivity. While the floods following the bushfires in New South Wales caused more devastation to some, it was a welcome relief for many, putting an end to the drought. Farmers who had not seen rain for 18 months finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel they once thought would never happen. Many recorded their delight as toddlers who had never seen rain or a puddle went viral on social media as they looked around in awe and delight at this new exciting experience. The tears and the smiles all at once came flooding through the news and social media. I don't know about you, but for me it was a welcome sight to see the joys these farmers were experiencing the day the rains came.
Now let's look again at the pandemic. I am not denying that this has not been a hard time. Living in Victoria, where we've experienced 2 major lockdowns, has definitely not been easy, especially when you work and have school-aged children. All of a sudden, not only were we working from home, but we also became teachers overnight. One thing I think is positive, though, that I think that has been highlighted during this pandemic is increased workplace flexibility. Once upon a time, there was limited flexibility in the workplace. Now, we've proven that it's not only possible, but some even thrive under this new way of doing things. It's opened doors and started changing the traditional ways of working. The pandemic has also changed the way Australians use sick leave. Prior to COVID, a lot of us had a strange mentality that meant we could only take a sick day if we were near or on our deathbed. Now, there's a real stigma around going to work sick. This pandemic has forced us all to up our self-care game a lot. I will add a however here though, and that is that most of us still work from home if we're able to, no matter how sick we are. Only really taking sick leave if we're really incredibly sick. But this has stopped the transmission of viruses like influenza, gastro, and many other communicable diseases that seemed to be so rampant before.
Hygiene practices have increased. We all know that so many men didn't wash their hands after going to the bathroom, let's be honest. Government support has increased for businesses and the unemployed, including sick leave for some industry casuals. With all these changes, if we were to continue with the COVID adapted processes, we could see real benefits for families, women, and employers. The playing field could become even between women and men and alleviate pressures from women who have seen in the past about being able to have a family and a career. The pandemic hasn't just changed the way we work, but what about the environment? Since being in lockdown, there has been a significant changes to the environment. It has decreased the carbon footprint due to less traffic on the roads and in the sky, and less even litter laying around our streets. With any luck, this will continue as society changes and forms what is called COVID normal. Along with these changes, I think the pandemic has made us reassess what is important in our lives, whether that be family, friends, or the importance of being able to just go out and have a coffee. I think after being through an event such as COVID, we might all appreciate the little things in life just a little more.
When we look at the past and the present, it makes me think about the future and what's to come. As mentioned before, we're currently experiencing La Nina, which is creating more frequent and severe storms. Now, normally this isn't too much of a problem in most people's eyes, but what about in late spring and coming into summer? The weather's warming up. Everything is overgrown due to restrictions being in place that prevented councils and governments from keeping up with maintenance and backburns. La Nina is dumping more rain on these overgrown areas, causing even more growth. It doesn't take much for a fire to start, and with loads of fuel on the ground, we could potentially see even more catastrophic bushfires in the seasons to come. But the overgrown fuel roads aren't just a fire risk. They're also hiding what I like to call slithering sticks. That's right, snakes. We've already seen an increase of snake bites as the weather warms up, and it's only predicted to get worse. Speaking as someone who has survived a snake bite, they're not pretty. But I was lucky, and many who are bitten aren't. In the southern states, all of our snakes are venomous, so all bites are potentially deadly. I encourage everyone to brush up on their snake bite first aid this summer. You never know, you could just save a life.
As we mentioned earlier, we aren't done with COVID just yet. As much as we would like to bury it and never have it rise again, the reality is that it's not going away in the near future. What we do have to ask ourselves, though, is are we going to constantly see continuous waves? We have already seen and thankfully overcome our second wave in Vic. South Australia also looks like to be managing their recent outbreaks really well. But are there going to be more waves? If you take a look at the Northern Hemisphere, their second wave re-emerged in their fall, which means ours is probably coming up in March. Well, before any vaccine is distributed to the masses, we will remain vulnerable for some time yet. I'm not saying we need to live in fear for the rest of our lives, but we can help with the prevention of community transmission by doing our bit and practicing good hand and cough sneeze hygiene and getting tested and staying home if we are sick. So that's our recap on the year most of us would like to forget. But now let's change tact a little. And as we have talked so much, let's pass it over to you. What has 2020 been like for you? Specifically, what have been your triumphs, either personal or professional? What have been your tribulations? What would you like to celebrate and what would you like to leave behind?
Well, I can say this year I've run the entire gambit of triumphs and tribulations, both personally and professionally. I've used some of lockdown to do a short course or two, expanding my knowledge and furthering my understanding of emergency and disaster management, which benefits not just myself, but my colleagues and my clients. But I've not gotten out of this year unscathed. I, for one, really struggled mentally during lockdown versions 1 and 2. My partner chopped off half of his finger at work, which meant months of rehab and healing. And I lost my best friend, my confidant, my beloved dog, who'd been with me for 13 years. So good and bad. How about you, Sam? What's happened to you this year?
Well, it's been a bit of a mixture for us. Professionally, I've been doing the same as you, expanding my knowledge and using that time wisely, which has increased my passion even more for our industry. Personally, I've managed to move to a new property, and gain a little bit of freedom with that and my family. So loving the country life is all I can say to that. So it's been a mixture of years. I mean, mentally, lockdown was tough, but unlike you, Bree, I was luckily classed as regional Victoria and didn't go through the amount that you did. We had a little bit more freedom up here.
Yes, you certainly did. I was incredibly jealous of everyone in other states and everyone in regional Victoria, particularly being on the border, just on the wrong side of that border, I should add. I think it made it feel a little bit worse.
Well, thank you for sharing some of your 2020 journey with us, Bree. Now, with the past year being so tough and the world changing around us, let's look ahead at what we would like to see in the near future. What are your aspirations? For me, I would like to see a sense of calm. This year has been so erratic with so much anxiety in the world that it's taking over. We may never see our lives like they were pre-2020, but I would like to take what I've learned from this year into the future. Simple pleasures like balanced work-family life, continuing my career trajectory, and accomplishing tasks that I once never thought I would be able to. Yes, I am still going to be mindful of what has happened and would never forget it, but I would like to be more prepared for uncertainty in the future.
I think there's some really good aspirations. For myself, I don't know, I think I've got a completely different sort of year coming up next year that's going to bring a whole new set of challenges. And I hope that if this last year has taught me anything, it is to be patient, to roll with the punches, and to expect the unexpected at all times. And I really hope that I can carry that through, not just in my professional life, but my personal life as well. So it'll be an exciting year to see what happens. So everyone out there, we certainly hope we've given you some food for thought going into the end of year holidays and the beginning of a new year. But before we go, I would just like to say that facilitating this webinar series has been a real highlight of my 2020. But I do, on that note, have a little bit of news that I would like to share. And that is that from February next year, I am handing the reins over to the lovely Sam Taylor, as I'm going to be going on maternity leave. So Sam has been heavily involved in the creation and distribution of this webinar series from its inception, and I'm sure that she'll do a marvelous job of filling my shoes. So on behalf of myself and my team, I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a joyous Los Posadas, a cheery Kwanzaa. So basically, no matter how you choose to celebrate, happy holidays, and we wish you all the best for the new year. I will see you all in 2020 at some point.
I think you mean 2021.
I do, absolutely. I hope I might see some of you in 2020. So I'll see you all in 2021 at some point. That was some baby brain kicking in.